Well, thank you everyone for coming out and joining me today. It's a very, very rainy. I'm here in central Kentucky, is where I'm located in the United States. Very rainy, very stormy here. I've got my fingers crossed that my internet stays up and we don't have any power issues. So um, hopefully we get through everything good today. So I'm excited to be here with everyone. Thank you guys for taking part of your day out to spend some time with me. I see we still got some folks streaming in, so we'll get started in a few moments. And but yeah, just wanted to say thanks for joining me. Uh, if you guys know, some of you may be following the progress of the CCNA Cyber Ops video training series that I've been doing. Got that all completed. Both materials for both exams is completed. Pardon me. We'll be releasing that to the public very soon, and so that's something I'll share with you guys today. Some information about that. So I'm excited to do that. Excited to talk about some really awesome free gifts you guys can get if something that you're interested in is cyber ops training. So we'll cover that a little bit later on, and of course today we're going to cover some CCNA cyber ops topics from both the SEC fund exam and the SEC ops exam. So we'll cover some of those today. And again, thank you guys for joining me. I see we do still have people coming in. So I see some people who had said they've never attended one of a webinar with me yet. So welcome. For those of you who've been around before, welcome to you as well. I saw some familiar names out there. Got to meet a few of you at Cisco Live. I don't know if those folks are in here, but I did meet some subscribers and some people who have used our materials at Cisco Live. So that was really awesome getting to meet with you folks. I had an awesome time at Cisco Live. And one thing that was reiterated from Chuck was just the fact that security is a really foundational concept still for us, and even more so as more and more devices are connecting to the internet. You know, we've got phones, we've got lamps, we've got all kinds of smart devices in our home that are connecting. And that's just from the personal side. The corporate side faces challenges as well, from bring your own device policies and tablets and cell phones and all of that stuff. So Cisco continues to recognize the importance of security, which is encouraging to me. I talked to a lot of folks at Cisco, some people who were looking for training products, who were interested in security, who were interested in cyber ops. So that may be some of you guys here today, and you're in the perfect spot for that. So can't wait to talk a little bit more about that and some opportunities that we have for training. But for those of you who have never attended one of my webinars and who've never been around, I'll just share a little bit about myself. And let me share my screen back out here so we can get that going. Just so you guys know a little bit about me and a little bit about my background. I joined the KW training team in January 2018. Now, I've known Kevin for many years before that, and we've been good friends, and was honored that Kevin asked me to come on and join his team. So that's been just an amazing experience. Many of you guys have been trainees of Kevin's for many, many years. So you know the quality that he brings and the knowledge that he has. So I was absolutely honored to be asked to come on board. I spent about a decade programming CNC equipment, computer numerical controlled equipment. I worked in the tool and die industry for about a decade, programming CNC lathes, programming CNC mills, grinders, any kind of equipment such as that. I programmed all of those. And then I did graphic and web design too, and IT consulting. I did freelance work for many years, doing that kind of stuff. I have CCNA in route and switch. I have a bachelor's in network security. I have a couple of associate's degrees in related technology, and also have several vendor specific and industry specific certifications surrounding specific types of equipment and different things like that. And then I worked for, most recently before coming on to Kevin Wallace Training, I worked for a large managed service provider, and they focused on HIPAA compliant IT. So if you're familiar with the HIPAA framework, which we'll actually talk a bit about that today, we serviced clients who needed HIPAA compliant IT, people like doctors' offices, hospitals, even law firms and things of that nature. So I have a lot of experience in the security and the compliance framework around HIPAA compliant IT. So that's something that's always been of interest to me. So, and then let me turn my camera off here. So I think it's hiding a bit of that. There we go. And then, just because of the managed service provider background that I have, I had experience with many different network and server technologies. Everybody's environment was totally different. So, from Windows servers to Linux servers to Cisco Firepower, Cisco ASA, all kinds of different backup devices, different kinds of offsite storage, on-site storage. So, a really wide variety of technology that I got to be accustomed to and got to have my hands on. So, it gave me a really awesome, well-rounded experience in the networking world. So, I would recommend anybody, if you want to be challenged, jump in and work for a managed service provider where from day to day, you have no idea what's coming down the pipe. You have no idea what you're going to be working on. It will really keep you on your toes. So what are we going to do today? Well, we're going to talk about some topics from SecFund 210-250 and SecOps 210-255. Those are both of the exams that are required for the CCNA CyberOps certification. So we're going to talk about a few topics around that today: cybersecurity forensics, evidence collection, digital artifacts. We'll talk about a few compliance frameworks. We'll talk about the cyber kill chain. And of course, we'll talk about the special offer I mentioned with some free bonuses just for you guys today. So if that's something you're interested in, we'll talk about that shortly. So I think you'll really want to hear about that and you'll really like that. So let's jump in. And I apologize for my voice. I'm still battling a cold from where I traveled and went to Cisco Live. Every time I travel like that, I just get a cold, a head cold. So I apologize for the throat clearing that's happening. If you hear my microphone mute, you'll know that I'm off mic coughing. So let's jump in today. And the first thing we're going to talk about, talk about just a brief introduction to forensics. Now, forensics is a concept that most of us are probably familiar with in some way, even if it's through television or movies. So we see forensics portrayed in serial television shows and movies in regards to criminal forensics. So we're kind of familiar with the concept. Most of us probably are. But digital evidence collection is particularly what we're going to discuss in regards to forensics. So digital evidence collection takes great care and detail, just like police forensics would take. So we never know. And the reason that we have to take such great care of that is that we never know what our findings are going to yield, or we never know when something may turn into a criminal investigation. We'll discuss criminal investigations a little bit more in a bit. But let me also say that forensics is a very, very huge discipline. The discipline of forensics is much broader than is covered in the CCNA CyberOps exams. In fact, many folks will focus their entire career on cybersecurity forensics, which is a very fascinating discipline to me. But as a member of a SecOps team, which is the goal of CCNA CyberOps, or as some sort of security administrator, we need to at least be familiar with some basic concepts around forensics, and we need to be able to properly perform some very basic cyber forensics if the need arises for that. And where is digital evidence found? Well, it's basically everywhere. Anywhere that data is crossing a device or where it's crossing an endpoint, there is potential to find forensic evidence left behind. Pretty much any information that can be processed by a computing device or stored on some sort of digital media is considered a potential place to find forensic evidence. So even in our RAM, which we don't really think about maybe as a place where we would do forensics, but there are ways to pull clear text passwords from live RAM. You may have seen that demonstrated before. That is possible. So hosts, firewalls, servers, routers, switches, all of these are potential sources of evidence, particularly if we have configured them correctly, if we've configured some sort of central management system to pull in information from those devices. So these are all potential forms all potential places where you could find evidence. Now, generally speaking, there are three categories of cyber forensic investigations. There are individual, public, and private. Now, this is in regards to CyberOps. They have three distinct categories. And the first one is individual investigations. These are typically in the form of what they call e-discovery or electronic discovery. This may include searching electronic sources such as documents. Maybe that's a Word document. Maybe it's an Excel spreadsheet. Also emails, databases, voicemails, and so on. Now, this would be a highly targeted investigation, most likely looking for something very specific or something very small in scope. The next one is private investigations. Now, private investigations are better known as corporate investigations. These would be investigations that would be relevant to an employer, but most likely would not have anything to do with any type of illegal activities. For example, maybe you suspect maybe an employee is spending way too much time browsing the internet, or maybe just generally neglecting their job duties. So you may get on there and do some sort of private investigation and try to determine their browsing activity. Are they spending all day on Netflix? What are they doing exactly? And this would be grounds for maybe discipline or even termination, depending on the level of negligence and how many times that has occurred. So this would not be something we would consider to be illegal, but certainly something that would be grounds for discipline or termination. Now, the final one, the third one, is the most serious, and these are public investigations. These are the most serious and typically end up in some sort of in a court system in some way. Now, I'll also say that a large percentage of the time, you want to know that public investigations don't start as public investigations. Okay, most often they start as a very routine, maybe a private investigation of something that is happening. Or maybe it's not an investigation at all. Maybe you stumble upon something, but suddenly there's evidence of a crime found. Crimes such as, extortion, murder, fraud, pedophilia, terrorism. These are just a few examples. But anything along these lines, once anything along these lines is discovered, the investigation has shifted and the scope has changed. And many times law enforcement will need to be involved in your investigation then. And we mentioned the importance of proper evidence collection and evidence collection techniques. So this is the exact reason why we need that, because we never know when our investigations may take a turn. We may think we're doing something very elementary, very basic, and then suddenly we run across something that shifts our investigation into a criminal investigation. So it's absolutely critical that even the most routine or seemingly benign investigations, it's important that they follow evidence collection guidelines. And if you think about it, that actually makes complete sense. If we start out a private investigation with no regard to proper evidence collection or evidence handling techniques, what happens if we suddenly run into evidence of one of these things on this list? Well, and then it changes into the scope of a public criminal investigation. Well, we've essentially tainted all of the evidence which could be used to prove malicious intent. If the chain of custody is broken, if protocols are not followed, then the evidence would not be admissible in a court of law, which is very important to remember. So let's talk briefly about evidence collection. Where and how do we do that? Well, there are a lot of ways to do that. And again, the most likely starting point would be endpoints and servers. Evidence integrity, we've already mentioned that. Evidence integrity is critical to ensure that there's no contamination and to make sure that whatever we find stands up in a court of law. And one of the ways we do that is with a piece of hardware called a write blocker. This is a very important tool that investigators will often use, and I've had the ability to use these myself in some cases. And what these devices do is they interface between a hard drive and whatever you're using to read that hard drive. Maybe it's your own computer, but they interface in between that. And what they do is they allow read commands to pass through so you can still see what's on the drive, but they block all of the write commands completely. Now, this may seem unnecessary. You may be thinking, well, of course I wouldn't write anything to a disk or save a file onto a disk that I'm investigating. But this is, often more tricky than you think, because there are so many background processes happening on a typical endpoint that you never even see. So things are always changing. The bits on the drive are always changing. The ones and the zeros on the storage media are changing even without our knowledge. So if you think about even simple things such as an email client running, or maybe there's Dropbox running in the background that you're not aware of, syncing up, things along those lines. So it's important that when you start a serious investigation, you're able to document and ensure that absolutely every single bit on a hard disk is unaltered throughout your entire investigation. And this allows you to prove the integrity of your evidence, because in a court of law, the integrity of your evidence is everything. Now, once you attach a write blocker, the first thing you'd want to do is make a complete system image. And this would be a bit for bit copy of the disk, often referred to as a physical copy, because you would most likely copy this directly to another identical physical disk. And this is typically achieved through any number of different available disk imaging tools out there. There are lots of different options for that. Now, there are many ways to create physical copies of a disk, and we know this. You can do it even through command line, and but the important consideration and the reason that we would use specific disk imaging tools to do that is that they will even create copies of the free or deleted disk space. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit about why that's important. But it will not only copy what's written to the disk, but it will copy the free space as well. So it's a best practice. Again, at the bottom of this list, we see that there's a best practice to make multiple copies of the disk. So I think that goes without saying, right? That's pretty intuitive to us. We want to make multiple copies in case something happens. And of course, we want to work our investigation from the copies themselves and not from the original source. Some common disk imaging tools are things like SafeBack, Snapback, Linux DD. There are many, many options out there that you can find, and many options that are specifically tailored to data forensics. So you can find out a lot more about that at the SANS.org website. They actually have a section dedicated to disk imaging tools. It's very helpful. You can go on there and just do a search for disk imaging tools and get to that white paper. And there's a lot of great information on there about that. Now, we've talked about copying the deleted files or the free space on a disk as well. And that's important because there can be potential evidence left behind even on disk space. So Encase is a forensic tool that I'm familiar with and that I've used. Tools like Encase, and there are others very similar to that. Tools like Encase can perform a search of the free or deleted space, and they can look for leftover artifacts, which is a process known as data carving. This can find blocks and sectors of hard drives that have unallocated space, but which may not have been overwritten yet. So you may know that if you delete something, it's not necessarily completely gone until it's been overwritten. And that's why there are many tools to perform a disk wipe. If you've ever used a disk wipe tool, there are many tools out there that will actually just write junk data over top of a disk after it deletes it to ensure that the deleted files are in fact gone and non-recoverable. And you can even try this yourself if you've done something like an SD storage card. I had a friend who came to me and had accidentally deleted all the family photos from the SD storage card. And my advice was, pull it out of the camera. Don't do anything else to it. Whatever you do, don't write over it. Don't take more pictures. And there are specific utilities out there that are made for photos that I was able to pull all of the deleted pictures back from that SD card. And they were completely amazed, but that is kind of the nature of storage. Until it's overwritten, there are artifacts still there that you can potentially recover things. So that's why something like Encase is important, to be able to grab all of that unallocated space where things may have been deleted, because most likely people who are up to no good, they're not going to leave stuff hanging around. They're not going to leave evidence hanging around. They may attempt to delete that. So this may be our only hope of recovering some of those things. Mobile device forensics. These are a huge challenge to us, and several reasons for that. One is there are so many operating system versions out there. You just think of Android alone and how many flavors of Android are running in the wild, and there's a new release, every 6 months or so, and there's updates that come out, and older phones don't get them, and so there are just handfuls of different operating systems running out in the wild. And this complicates forensics investigations. And another reason that is because both Android and Apple, have device encryption in place, which makes forensics challenging. This complicates our forensics investigations. And for this reason, there isn't really a good singular solution for mobile forensics. You usually have to get some sort of specialized solution tailored specifically for maybe Android or for Apple. In fact, I had a college professor who specialized in Android evidence collection. That was his specialty. He studied it and he loved it, and that was what he did. And he specialized in Android evidence extraction. He would often be contracted as an investigator for public investigations, or even as an expert court witness a lot of times. And that was what he did. And he told me, it's such a specialized field. It's so hard to do that you almost have to just focus on that completely if you're interested in mobile device forensics. It's something that's kind of tough to dabble in. And also because the landscape changes so frequently. So, and then we move on to network forensics. Network forensics can also yield important evidence. We've talked about net flow in some previous webinars and how that's an important topic for cyber ops. Net flow and syslogs can help capture and sort all the tremendous amounts of digital data that cross across our infrastructure, our infrastructure devices and our endpoints. So here we see a list of best practices for our network infrastructure. These can help us out with digital forensics. Centralized logs, of course, are a great source of data. Something like a SIM management system, perhaps. Anything that can leverage NetFlow at a central point so that you can examine all of that. Then we have change control, keeping our iOS up to date, and secure boot, credential management. All of these are ways to harden our devices as well. So we not only need to have ways to pull that network forensic information, but we also have to make sure that the integrity of the data stays intact. If our devices can be accessed by a threat actor or by a malicious party, or even by an employee who shouldn't necessarily have that level of access in there, the network forensic evidence can potentially be tainted or even deleted. So, if you present your evidence in court and the defense is able to say, well, their firewall wasn't up to date, so it potentially could have been breached and anyone could have gotten in there and done this. I mean, that's a valid argument. So you have to cover all of your bases when it comes to network forensics. Another concept to be aware of are artifact elements. Artifacts are items that get left behind based on certain activities of the user. And you can think of these as footprints or clues to where they've been, what they've been up to. And the good thing about artifacts are that unless a user is fairly highly aware of forensics techniques, they may not realize that these are being left behind. Also, to our advantage, many artifacts are hard to access and hard to collect unless, number one, you've had specialized training, and number two, you have specialized tools to pull those artifacts. Three main reasons that these are important. First, artifacts are used to corroborate content. So content is what we would think of as tangible content or tangible evidence. So even if we have tangible content, corroboration is important for a number of reasons. Some of the tangible content that we might have may include documents, emails, voicemails, text messages, and things like that. So maybe we have all of those things which point to malicious activity, and the artifacts can help reinforce the case and prove beyond a shadow of a doubt the things that we found. So they're very good supporting evidence for us. Second, they can reveal things that tangible content never will. So, for example, it's unusual to find an email confession, someone who's, or maybe a detailed Word document titled evilplan.doc, where someone's laid out their entire intent to commit a crime against our organization and saved it to their corporate share drive. That's pretty unusual. So artifacts can help establish timelines and details, and they can provide proof that may not actually be present with tangible content. If we can't find tangible content, then oftentimes artifacts can help take the place of that. And finally, you can establish motive and intent. Maybe you find a web browser search in a history where a user has searched for how to steal from your employer or something along those lines. Now, this in itself wouldn't be an admission of guilt because maybe, that doesn't necessarily mean they have stolen from the employer, but this coupled with some sort of tangible evidence, can help to show clear intentions of an individual. They can help to piece together a part of that puzzle. So, now, artifact elements may also be left behind in the case of a cyber attack. Common artifacts can include IP addresses, DNS information, certain URLs that have been visited, and so forth. Now, one step toward collecting artifacts easily is by using some sort of central management system that we've talked about, something that utilizes NetFlow, something like a SIM solution perhaps. And Cisco actually has a couple of very specific answers to this in the form of their Firepower Management Center and in the form of the Cisco AMP. So, these are just a couple of their AMP stands for Advanced Malware Protection. Pardon me. These are a couple of solutions that Cisco's put out there that are able to gather NetFlow data. They're able to leverage that, and you can see everything traversing across your network. And they can gather and report many different types of artifact data, both during and before a security incident. So that is a general overview of forensics. And I think that's, every single one of those forensics topics are relevant to CCNA cyber ops. And they're things that you're going to want to have awareness about. And I think that's a good halfway point to kind of shift our focus here. And we're going to talk about some important industry compliance frameworks. But before we do that, I promised you guys I wanted to talk a little bit about my series release. And as I said, I'm super excited to finish this series release, and I'm going to be opening up that for the public today, actually. I'm going to be releasing that entire video series that covers both of the exams, the SecOps and the Sec Fund exam. And however, I am going to share with you guys a very special deal for attending this webinar. I've got 3 free bonuses to offer if you purchase this entire video series today. Now, this video series will be available if you go out to our website anytime after Friday. You'll still be able to purchase this entire series, but it will not include the 3 free bonuses that I'm offering here. And let me just run down those bonuses for you so you know what you're getting. Click back in here for us. First of all, you will get bonus number 1 is your IT career success blueprint. This is something that Kevin has developed. He's developed this series because there's a question that he gets asked over and over from so many. How do I plan out my career? Or how can I successfully organize and prepare? So this training that Kevin has developed, it walks you through Kevin's 6 keys to success as an IT professional. It includes downloadable videos, MP3s, slides, and worksheets. Bonus number 2 is his CCNA IP subnetting simplified. Now, if you're like me, I always have to practice my subnetting over and over. It's just something that if I don't practice, I'll lose it. So subnetting is critical knowledge to any IT professional, and it certainly will help you in the cybersecurity field. So in this course from Kevin, you'll learn how to master IP version 4 subnetting. And finally, bonus number 3 is called Your Cisco Cert Success Path. This is a path that Kevin has mapped out himself, and you'll learn here the 6 phases of what your Cisco career success path would be. Kevin talks pretty candidly about many of the steps that he would take if he were starting his career over. I found this absolutely fascinating to kind of see, because Kevin, he's a double CCIE. He's got lots of knowledge. So it was pretty fascinating to me to see what he would do if he were starting over. Now, as a note, this course is still in development. It's about halfway through by Kevin. It's about halfway completed. But as always, as with all of our courses, all the videos will be available for offline download. And of course, you get the lifetime access to the CCNA Cyber Ops video training series. It covers the Sec Fund 210-250 and SecOps 210-255 exam topics. 22 video modules, 137 individual videos. They're all downloadable for offline watching. And as with all of our products, there is a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you're not happy for any reason at all, you don't even have to tell us why you're not happy. If you're just not happy with it, if you want a refund, you've got 30 days, no questions asked. no hassle refund. We'll give you a full refund. So I'm actually going to push that offer up, and that will kind of sit over there in the chat window for you guys. And if you are interested in that offer, I would encourage you to jump on that. As I said, that offer, you can go to our website anytime after Friday. You'll be able to purchase that series, but these 3 bonuses will not remain on there. So if that's something you're interested in, go and do that. I promise you'll love it. And if not, like I said, it's a no hassle, no risk, money back guarantee. So give that a try. Go take a look at that. Now, as I'll leave that offer up, and we'll talk about it again a little more at the end. But we'll move on, and we'll jump into a few different compliance frameworks. Now, based on the industry that you work in or that your customers work in, there are particular frameworks that must be followed. And sometimes even multiple frameworks it's important to follow. It just depends on which industry you're in and which industry your customers are on. So the first one we'll talk about is PCI DSS, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. Kind of a long name, but it's PCI DSS for short. This framework is mandatory for any company that handles payment card processing. It includes merchants who collect payments. It includes processing companies such as Stripe or PayPal, and also banks and credit card issuers. Now, if you've heard the term PCI compliant, this is what's meant by following the PCI DSS framework. Non-compliance is a very serious issue that can be met with legal ramifications and all sorts of fines. And the goal of the framework is to protect consumer data when it's being processed, when it's being transferred, or when it's being stored in any way. So many security professionals or researchers think that there's a huge problem with PCI DSS, but they're not quite sure how to solve that problem. And they believe it's a problem because of the sheer number of incidents. Now, there's an argument about whether this is primarily a user education issue, a lack in compliance policing at certain organizations, or if it's simply a standard that needs to be updated and brought more current. I personally believe that there's no one answer and that there's a combination of all of these factors. But regardless, the numbers don't lie. This is a big, big issue. In 2017 alone, we had over 1.3 million consumer fraud cases reported, with users paying out over $744 million in fraudulent charges. Now, that is a huge, huge number, and it's growing. And this should tell you exactly how important this framework is for security. You can go and check out more about PCI DSS if you want their security standards. You can go to PCIsecuritystandards.org. Very simple website to remember. You can find more information about that. And there you'll find a list of protected data found on the card. And this data is either in the magnetic strip or in the embedded chip on the card. This includes cardholder data such as account number, cardholder name, expiration dates, and then also sensitive authentication data that could be found in the magnetic strip or the chip, such as service codes, verification numbers, such as the CVC2 number on the back of your card, and of course, personal identification numbers or PINs. Another well-known compliance framework is HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. I mentioned before that I actually worked with a managed service provider who specialized in HIPAA compliance. So this is the framework with which I'm most familiar. HIPAA's been around since 1996. The main goal is to maintain the confidentiality of our PHI, our protected health information. Now, if you've been around as long as I have, you may have noticed that a few changes at your doctor's office. You used to be able to call your doctor's office and discuss medical records over the phone. That is not necessarily the case anymore. They will not do that because of HIPAA regulations. Also, the sign-in sheets, when you sign in at the desk, those used to be, I can remember many times going and seeing an entire list of people who had signed in before me. Well, now they do some things to hide that, so you can't see every person who has signed in before you at the doctor. So just a couple of examples of how that has changed and how that regulates things. So the reason that this is regulated is because many of the items found in our protected health information can be used as identity theft or fraud tools. So it should go without saying as to why that's important to protect that patient data. Another part of HIPAA is known as the HIPAA security rule. Now, this focuses specifically on the digital transfer of healthcare related data, which is known as ePHI or electronic PHI. This applies to hospitals and physicians' offices themselves, of course, but also applies to anyone who does business with healthcare companies. Again, the MSP that I worked for was considered an outside company, but we had to adhere to the HIPAA security rule. I was not allowed to break those. I was not allowed to access patient records or other sensitive PHI. HIPAA safeguards include administrative, physical, and technical safeguards, also pretty self explanatory. Now, all of these safeguard categories are critical parts of just any general network security. You want to have administrative, physical, and technical safeguards for general network security, no matter what you're talking about. But these are also applied accordingly to HIPAA compliancy as well. Finally, one compliance framework that you may not have as much of awareness about is the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, known as the SOX Act. This was created in 2002 as a result of some corporate financial scandals. And again, you may recall if you've been around as long as I have, you may remember the whole circus surrounding WorldCom, Global Crossing, Enron, all those scandals that kind of hit prior to this act being passed. These companies were found guilty of all kinds of different financial fraud and insider trading, among other things. And it literally cost investors billions of dollars as the stocks collapsed. So this, of course, shook the public's confidence in the U.S. securities market. And this act was passed and designed and put in place in order to restore investor faith back into the market. So the goal is to basically put some accountability in place for corporations and to ensure that their financial information is accurate and not altered in any way. And it also, one of the things it did, it raised penalties very steeply for fraudulent activities. Violations can result in fines, penalties, and even complete removal from the stock exchange market. So this applies to any company who has public stock, and also it applies to any accounting firms which would serve these companies. So it's pretty broad. Now, the three most referenced sections that kind of outline what this is all about are sections 302, 404, and 409. These sections kind of give you just a high level overview of what SOX is actually about. You can see that section 302 makes C-level employees personally responsible for certifying financial records. This means that CEOs, CFOs, etc., they would be considered personally responsible for data security, which is honestly a pretty serious thing to think about if you know you're personally responsible for that. Section 404 specifies that an annual audit must be performed by an external auditor, and then the report will be published for public viewing. And finally, Section 409 says that companies must have the ability to log and publicly report any changes to their financial conditions or operations. So again, the main focus of this act is to prevent the kind of corporate scandals that we saw with Enron and Global Crossing. Now, what does this mean from, these are kind of all feel like administrative duties, right? So what does this mean for us as an IT security professional from an IT security perspective? Well, security administrators, our focus will be mainly on internal controls. We won't necessarily worry about all of the administrative duties so much as we will worry about having appropriate protection measures in place. This would include physical and electronic controls to make sure that only authorized users are able to access sensitive data. It would also include IT security controls such as firewalls, IPS, IDS, antivirus, and so on. It would include change management controls, meaning that there's a running record of any changes that are made to the infrastructure, to the environment, who made that change, when was it made, etc. This will be changes to firewall rules, installed software, and a very long list of other things. And finally, backup controls. There should be systems in place to back up system data in the event that data recovery is needed. So you can see that there are a lot of different considerations here. Now, let's go over the cyber kill chain model. And the cyber kill chain model represents the steps taken by an adversary when they are attempting to accomplish an intrusion. And it's important to know each phase of this kill chain so that you can identify and intercept attempts no matter what phase it may be in. This model was developed as a consistent way that we can organize and track threats and also breach attempts. So what we're going to do here is we're going to walk through those 7 phases. The first phase is reconnaissance. Basically, this means data gathering. You may be familiar, something we've talked about in previous exams is, the concept of open source intelligence, active and passive monitoring, data gathering. So one of the main ways that reconnaissance happens is through OSINT, open source intelligence. This is a passive method for data gathering, and this may happen through search engines, through looking through social media profiles, and so on. And then there's also active reconnaissance, which can be more intrusive methods such as network mapping or port scanning. The second phase is weaponization. Once an attacker has performed reconnaissance and identified a target, they'll then begin to tailor a specific attack. Now, this phase is a lot of research, a lot of trial and error, and there are a lot of times attackers may even recreate a lab environment that models exactly what a target has in their infrastructure. And they'll do that so that they can take advantage of a network in a lab environment without risking any sort of detection in the actual production environment. And basically what they're looking for is they're looking for an open door into the environment. Automated tools you see here, we have Nessus and Metasploit. These automated tools can really speed up this phase of the process. Nessus can help to find certain vulnerabilities in a system. Metasploit in particular can help to develop exploits that can take advantage of that. Metasploit has thousands and thousands already built into there and ready to be used. The next phase is the delivery phase. Once an exploit is found and a threat actor once a vulnerability is found, a threat actor would develop some software or code, or maybe they would take something from Metasploit and alter that in some way, or maybe just use it directly as it is, depending on what it is. They have to find a way to get this into the target system. They have to find a way to deliver it. And this will often require security evasion and social engineering techniques. Now, common ways for this to be delivered are through network contact, website redirection, and often even through phishing emails. We again, here's a list of the ways that delivery can happen. Network contact, they can deliver it if they have direct network contact into that target network. They can get in that way. Website redirection, this often happens through email phishing attempts. Email phishing is the number one threat to most organizations. Where I used to work for an MSP, I can't tell you how many of those we would have reported a week. Email phishing attempt where a user would be redirected to a malicious site to have some sort of malicious software installed. And of course, USB devices. We've all heard stories of pen testers or even threat actors going and sprinkling USB devices in a parking lot. I've heard stories of that, or pen testers going in and just laying USBs on a break room table. And, almost 100% surety, someone will come in and think, oh, free thumb drive, go plug it into their computer. Unbeknownst to them, there's some sort of script runs. They have malicious software installed, and bam, there's a back door built. So that's how, just a few of the ways that delivery can take place. The next phase is exploitation. Now we know that new vulnerabilities in our operating systems and in our software are found almost every single day. And that's what makes this phase so challenging, and the reason we have to have good security infrastructure and practices. The large majority of attacks are on known vulnerabilities, things that we know about, and maybe we just haven't got around to patching it, or maybe we just like the way things used to be. Maybe we turned off our updates, or we refuse our updates. An absolutely horrible practice, by the way. We don't want to do that. So threat actors feed on known vulnerabilities for the most part. And that's why the Metasploit framework we mentioned is so successful, because it's a framework, a library built of exploits that are known to work on known vulnerabilities. So IPS, IDS, anti-malware, antivirus systems. All of these are critical to protect against this phase. And of course, please keep your systems up to date with vendor patches and bug fixes. It's for your own good. Even if you like the way it used to look, even if you don't like the new user GUI, please keep those up to date. The next phase is installation. And installation refers to how an attacker really starts to plant themselves in and get a good foothold. And this is normally done very quietly. You'll see the statistic here is that the industry average for breach detection is 100 to 200 days. Tremendously long, a tremendously long amount of time. The famous and recent Equifax breach went undetected for over 2 months, which gives a threat actor lots and lots of time to not only hide, but to test and then wreak havoc inside of an environment like that. The main goal of that is to maintain access as long as necessary. This is done through things like we mentioned backdoors into systems, through maybe an unauthorized VPN connection that was set up from a target network to their own network, or through obtaining login credentials. The next phase is called C2, which stands for command and control. This is when an attacker is accessing the breached system. At this point, there may be various levels of user and network access for the threat actor. This is when attacker has been accessing the breached system, and depending on what they've been able to capture, they may have different levels of access. This is another reason why access controls and user identity management systems are so critical. The most dangerous part of this phase is that a threat actor is essentially what we call hands-on keyboard inside the network. In other words, they have virtual access to hosts or to infrastructure inside the network, and that gives them a tremendous amount of power to do a lot of different things. And finally, we have the actions phase. This is when an adversary is taking access. This is when an adversary is taking actions inside the network and they're launching attacks, or maybe they're starting to even pivot to other systems. Pivoting is a concept that we talk about in cyber ops. It means to get a foothold in one system and move on to another system later on. So this can look like a lot of different things, just depending on the objectives of the attacker. Their goal may be simply to find out personal information or just to listen on the network. Or it may be a full-scale denial of service attack. It just depends. And it's also possible that this may be a small step towards a larger attack. Maybe they want to establish control of an internal host, and then they want to use that host to target other internal systems. And that essentially starts the kill chain all over again with a new set of goals and exploits. This is actually fairly common because once you're inside a network, it's much easier to own a network than it is to do that from the outside. Most pen testers will tell you that getting in is 99% of the battle. It's basically game over if they can find a way in. So now that's a long chain with lots of moving parts. So I hope you see that the big takeaway here, other than, obviously you need to know for cyber ops, you need to know this kill chain knowledge. You need to know each of the phases. But the big takeaway also, hopefully, is the fact that we absolutely need to use every single tool at our disposal to combat these types of incidents. That includes network segmentation, that includes behavior and anomaly analysis systems, identity management, auditing. I mean, the list is long and it goes on and on and on. So all of these processes, procedures, and infrastructure devices are critical for our success as a security professional. All right, let me get my camera back on here for us. What I got for you guys today. I promised I would keep it under an hour, and it looks like we're clocking right at that. So just to answer a few questions I saw pop up, I saw some folks ask about labs being included. CCNA Cyber Ops exam does not require any lab work. The most that you'll be asked to do in depth on that exam will be to examine certain types of logs and identify what those logs came from, maybe find some relevant information inside those. So this is not a lab-based exam. This is an associate level exam, an entry level exam, and it's a good jumping off point into cybersecurity. I've talked to a lot of folks who are using that to kind of as a groundwork, because there is a lot of good, very widespread cybersecurity knowledge in there that applies to all kinds of other industries. I see a lot of the knowledge overlap in the higher level security exams as well, things that are found in cyber ops. Just a great foundation for that. And I think that offer is still up for you guys. So if that's something you're interested in, go and check that out. It's $297 for the lifetime access, all downloadable videos. You'll always have those. You can take those offline, watch them at your convenience. And again, if you buy that, you'll get the 3 free bonuses that we mentioned from Kevin, all some great resources from him. Let's see, CCNA Cyber Ops. Oh, CCNP Cyber Ops. That I do not know about the release date of CCNP Cyber Ops. That's something that I asked around a little bit at Cisco Live, but I didn't really know yet. So I know Cisco is throwing a lot of weight at the security world. They really put a lot of value in it. And so that's something that I think they're still continuing to develop. And it's a little different from the CCNA security track. So the CCNA security track is more network based, where you will actually, work on firewalls and access control lists and things of those nature. And while you need that sort of knowledge for cyber ops, it's more of an analyst level. So that's kind of the difference between the two. I saw that question as well. So again, yeah, thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out with me today. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time. I know it's valuable. And I hope you get a chance to go and check out that video training. I would recommend, if you are doing cyber ops, I would recommend this video training series, and I would recommend the official cert guide, which is actually really good for the cyber ops. And I've talked with a couple of students who've came through and watching my videos who've had early access and were able to pass with the videos and the official cert guide. So it's definitely doable. And I see a lot of thanks coming through. All you guys are so welcome. Can't wait to be with you guys again. I will leave this webinar open just for a few more minutes. I'll turn my screen on, and yeah. So if you have interest in those bonuses, those are something you're going to want to jump on. As I said, you'll be able to buy that video series from here on out from our website. But if you're interested in those free bonuses, feel free to do that and jump on that. And thanks again. And I can't wait to talk with you guys soon.